The date is 26th August 2025, and the global economic landscape has been irrevocably altered. What was once a celebrated strategic partnership between the world's oldest and largest democracies has descended into a bitter trade war. Yesterday, the United States administration, under President Donald Trump, unleashed a punitive 50% tariff on a vast array of Indian exports, a move that sent shockwaves from the bustling ports of Mumbai to the corridors of power in New Delhi. This was not a subtle diplomatic nudge, it was an economic sledgehammer. The decision, effective from tomorrow, 27th August, targets the very heart of India's export economy, threatening to unravel decades of carefully cultivated commercial ties and plunging millions of livelihoods into a state of profound uncertainty. The immediate trigger for this drastic measure appears multifaceted, a complex cocktail of geopolitics and protectionist economics. Washington has pointed fingers at India for its continued procurement of discounted crude oil from Russia, accusing New Delhi of profiteering from a conflict that has divided the West. This, coupled with a growing trade surplus in India's favor, which reached approximately $46 billion in 2024, provided the perfect pretext for an administration keen on projecting a tough, America First stance. The tariffs are not just a trade policy, they are a loud and clear message, a form of economic coercion designed to force India's hand on matters of strategic alignment and international trade practices. For the average Indian citizen, the complexities of trade deficits and geopolitical posturing can seem distant, yet the impact of this 50% tariff will be felt intimately and immediately. It means that an Indian-made shirt that once sold for $20 in an American department store could now cost $30, making it uncompetitive against rivals from Vietnam or Bangladesh. It means that the intricately carved wooden handicrafts from Saharanpur or the gleaming brassware from Moradabad will suddenly become luxury items for American consumers. This is not merely a dispute between two governments. It is a direct assault on the economic lifelines of countless Indian artisans, factory workers, and small business owners who depend on the American market for their survival. The announcement has cast a long dark shadow over the Indian economy. While officials from the Reserve Bank of India have attempted to calm the markets, suggesting the impact may be contained, the anxiety on the ground is palpable. Exporters who had just shipped consignments are now frantically trying to understand if their goods will be subject to the new levy upon arrival. Buyers in the US are threatening to cancel orders, fearing they will be unable to absorb the steep price increase. The trade war is no longer a theoretical possibility discussed in academic seminars. It has arrived, and its first casualties are the very businesses and workers that form the backbone of India's Make in India dream. To comprehend the sheer magnitude of this trade conflict, one must look beyond the headlines and delve into the core objectives driving both Washington and New Delhi. For the United States, the motivations are a blend of hard-nosed economics and domestic political theater. The primary goal is to compel India to reduce its reliance on Russian energy, thereby isolating Moscow further on the global stage. The White House sees India's strategic neutrality as a direct challenge to its foreign policy aims. By imposing these tariffs, the US aims to make the cost of this neutrality unbearably high for the Indian economy, hoping to force a realignment away from Russia and more firmly into the Western camp. Furthermore, the issue of the trade deficit is central to the American narrative. The Trump administration has consistently framed trade deficits as a direct loss for American workers and industries. The $46 billion goods trade surplus that India enjoys with the US is portrayed as evidence of unfair practices, even though the services trade between the two nations is largely balanced. By slapping on a 50% tariff, the administration seeks to forcibly rebalance this trade relationship, protect American jobs from what it deems to be cheaper foreign competition, and fulfill a key promise to its political base. This action serves as a powerful symbol of economic nationalism, especially in the run-up to a presidential election year, where such muscular policies resonate strongly with certain voter demographics. On the other side of the globe, India's objectives are rooted in a fierce defense of its strategic autonomy and the protection of its nascent economic recovery. For New Delhi, the relationship with Russia is not merely transactional. It is a legacy partnership that spans defense, energy, and diplomacy. Maintaining this tie is seen as crucial for India's national interest, providing a counterbalance in a complex region. Therefore, acceding to American pressure to abandon Russian oil is not an option the Indian government is willing to consider lightly. It would be perceived as a surrender of its sovereign right to formulate its own foreign and energy policies, a cornerstone of its post-independence identity. Domestically, the Modi government's primary objective is to shield its economy, particularly the vulnerable micro, small and medium enterprises sector, from the fallout. The Atmanirbhar Bharat or Self-Reliant India campaign has become the rallying cry. The government's focus is on ensuring that exporters do not go bankrupt, that workers do not lose their jobs, and that the economic disruption is minimized. This involves a delicate balancing act, projecting strength on the international stage by refusing to bow to American demands, while simultaneously implementing domestic support measures to cushion the blow. The conflict is thus a test of India's economic resilience and its diplomatic fortitude in an increasingly polarized world. The 50% tariff is not a surgical strike, it is carpet bombing. It indiscriminately hits a wide swathe of Indian industries that have, for years, viewed the United States as their most reliable and lucrative market. Among the hardest hit is the textiles and apparel sector. This industry, a massive employer of both skilled and unskilled labor, now faces an insurmountable price disadvantage. For example, a container of cotton t-shirts exported from Tirupur, which previously faced a modest tariff, will now see its final cost in the US market skyrocket. American buyers will inevitably turn to competitors like Vietnam and Bangladesh, who are not subject to these punitive duties, leaving Indian factories with cancelled orders and idle machinery. Another major casualty is the gems and jewelry sector, particularly the diamond polishing hub of Surat. This industry, which accounts for a significant portion of India's exports to the US, will see its competitiveness evaporate overnight. A polished diamond or a piece of handcrafted jewelry from India will now be 50% more expensive for an American importer. This price hike is impossible to absorb for the small and medium-sized units that dominate this sector. The intricate supply chain, from sourcing rough stones to cutting, polishing, and exporting finished goods, is now under threat of complete disruption, jeopardizing the livelihoods of hundreds of thousands of specialized artisans. The pain extends to India's coastal regions, where the seafood industry, especially shrimp farming, is facing an existential crisis. States like Andhra Pradesh and West Bengal have built a thriving aquaculture ecosystem primarily catering to the American market. With the new tariff, Indian shrimp becomes prohibitively expensive. An American restaurant chain that previously sourced its shrimp from India will now look to suppliers from Ecuador or Thailand. This leaves Indian farmers with ponds full of shrimp they cannot sell at a remunerative price, leading to potential bankruptcies and a collapse of the local rural economy that depends on this trade. Beyond these headline sectors, the damage permeates through numerous other labor-intensive industries. The leather goods cluster in Kanpur and Agra, the handicrafts and brassware industry of Moradabad, and even segments of the chemical industry will face severe headwinds. For each of these sectors, the United States is not just another market, it is often the largest and most important one. The tariff effectively shuts the door on them, forcing an urgent and painful search for new markets, which is a long and arduous process. The immediate reality is one of lost revenue, production cuts, and a looming employment crisis across India's industrial heartlands. The abstract numbers of trade deficits and tariffs translate into tangible crises in the bustling industrial clusters that form the backbone of India's export machine. Take Tirupur in Tamil Nadu, known as the knitwear capital of India. For thousands of small and medium-sized garment factories here, the US market is not just important, it is everything. An owner of a medium-sized factory, let's call him Mr. Subramanian, would have woken up to frantic calls from his American buyers, putting multi-million rupee orders on hold indefinitely. His factory, which employs 500 workers, now faces the grim prospect of shutting down production lines. For his employees, many of whom are migrant workers, this means the loss of their only source of income. Now travel north to Surat in Gujarat, the world's diamond cutting and polishing epicenter. Over 90% of the world's diamonds are cut here, and a substantial portion is destined for American jewelry stores. A small workshop owner, say Ramesh Bai, who employs 20 artisans, relies on a steady stream of orders from US-based importers. With the 50% tariff, his importer has cancelled the latest consignment. Ramesh Bai now has a stock of polished diamonds he cannot sell and no new orders on the horizon. He faces the heart-wrenching decision of having to lay off artisans whose skills have been passed down through generations, skills that have little application outside the diamond trade. The story is tragically similar in Panipat, Haryana, the textile city. This cluster is a major exporter of home furnishings like carpets, bedsheets and curtains, with nearly 60% of its exports heading to the US. A local exporter who has spent 2 decades building relationships with American retail chains now finds those relationships worthless. The tariff makes his high-quality carpets unaffordable. His looms are falling silent, and the weavers, dyers and finishers who depend on his factory for their daily wages are now facing unemployment. The ripple effect will be felt across the town, from the tea stalls outside the factories to the local shops that rely on the workers' spending. This narrative of despair echoes across the country. In Moradabad, Uttar Pradesh, artisans crafting intricate brass handicrafts see their future dimming. In the coastal belts of Andhra Pradesh, shrimp farmers stare at their ponds, wondering how they will repay the loans they took to cultivate a crop that now has no buyer. The American tariff is not just a policy document, it is a wrecking ball swinging through the lives of ordinary people. It represents a sudden and brutal disruption to established economic ecosystems, threatening to wipe out businesses, erase specialized skills, and push millions of hard-working Indians into poverty and despair. Faced with an economic crisis of this magnitude, New Delhi's response has been, well, swift and multi-pronged, transforming the corridors of the Finance Ministry and the Reserve Bank of India into a veritable economic war room. The immediate priority, is to provide a financial lifeline to the beleaguered exporters and MSMEs who are on the front lines of this trade war. The government is expected to announce a substantial emergency credit line guarantee scheme. This would encourage banks to lend to affected export units without fear of default, providing them with the crucial working capital needed to stay afloat, pay salaries, and avoid immediate bankruptcy while they search for alternative markets. In parallel, fiscal measures are being rolled out to ease the cash flow crunch. One of the most significant steps is the fast-tracking of goods and services tax refunds. For exporters, these refunds are often locked up in bureaucratic delays, blocking vital funds. The government has pledged to clear the backlog and process new claims within a matter of days rather than months. This move, while not compensating for the lost orders, injects immediate liquidity into the system, allowing businesses to manage their operational expenses and survive the initial shock of the tariff imposition. It is honestly a critical, practical step to staunch the bleeding. The Reserve Bank of India, in its role as the guardian of financial stability, is deploying its own set of tools. The central bank is expected to conduct open market operations, which involves buying government bonds to inject more cash into the banking system. This ensures that there is ample liquidity available for banks to lend, preventing a credit freeze that could cripple the wider economy. Furthermore, the RBI might consider a temporary relaxation of loan classification norms for businesses in the hardest-hit sectors, giving them more time to repay their debts without their accounts being labeled as non-performing assets. This really provides crucial breathing room for struggling enterprises. Beyond these immediate firefighting measures, the government is reinforcing its long-term Atmanirbhar Bharat strategy. This crisis is being framed as a catalyst to accelerate efforts to reduce dependency on any single market and to bolster domestic manufacturing and consumption. This involves not only financial support, but also a renewed push for structural reforms, simplifying regulations, and improving the ease of doing business. The strategy is twofold. First, survive the immediate storm through emergency support, and second, use the crisis as an opportunity to build a more resilient, diversified, and self-reliant Indian economy that is better insulated from such external shocks in the future. While domestic measures provide a safety net, India's primary offensive strategy on the international stage is to challenge the legality of the American tariffs at the World Trade Organization in Geneva. The WTO's Dispute Settlement Mechanism, or DSM, serves as the global umpire for trade disagreements, and India is preparing to make a robust case that the US has violated its treaty obligations. The core of India's argument will be that the 50% tariff is a unilateral and discriminatory measure that breaches the WTO's foundational principles, particularly the most favored nation rule, which requires countries to treat all their trading partners equally. The legal process at the WTO, though often lengthy, follows a structured path. The first step is a formal consultation, where India and the US will have a chance to negotiate a settlement. If these talks fail, as is likely in this politically charged environment, India can request the establishment of a dispute settlement panel. This panel, composed of trade experts, will act like a court, examining the evidence and arguments from both sides. They'll assess whether the US tariffs are permissible under any WTO exceptions, such as national security. An argument the US might try to make, though, honestly, it is often difficult to justify. If the panel rules in India's favor, it will recommend that the United States bring its measures into conformity with WTO rules, which essentially means withdrawing the tariffs. This is, of course, the ideal outcome for India. However, the US would have the right to appeal the decision. Herein lies a modern challenge. The WTO's appellate body has been non-functional for years due to US objections to appointing new members. This could lead to a legal limbo. Nevertheless, a panel ruling in favor of India would provide immense diplomatic leverage and international legitimacy to India's position, isolating the US on the world stage. Should the US refuse to comply with a final ruling, the WTO framework provides a final powerful tool: retaliation. The WTO could authorize India to impose its own countervailing tariffs on American goods and services up to a value equivalent to the trade damage caused by the US measures. This would mean India could legally raise tariffs on American products like almonds, apples, or high-end machinery. While a retaliatory tariff war hurts both sides, the authorization from the WTO would give India the legal and moral high ground. It's a last resort, but a crucial one in ensuring that the rules-based global trading order is upheld. The US-India trade war is not happening in a vacuum. It is a seismic event that is, honestly, causing a dramatic realignment of the global geopolitical chessboard. The most immediate and stunning consequence is the rapid rapprochement between India and China. For years, relations between the two Asian giants have been frosty, especially following the border clashes of 2020. However, faced with a common economic adversary in Washington, New Delhi and Beijing have found a compelling reason to set aside their differences. A high-stakes summit between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping is scheduled in Beijing for 31st August, a meeting that would have been unthinkable just months ago. This thawing of India-China relations is being actively encouraged by Russia, which sees an opportunity to forge a powerful Eurasian bloc capable of challenging American dominance. The revival of the Russia-India-China, or RIC trilateral grouping, is now a distinct possibility. This strategic triangle, if solidified, could create a formidable counterweight to Western-led alliances. The US tariff, intended to pull India away from Russia, appears to have had the opposite effect, pushing New Delhi into deeper strategic conversations with both Moscow and Beijing. This represents a significant blow to America's Indo-Pacific strategy, which hinges on a strong US-India partnership to contain China. The trade war also puts immense strain on existing alliances like the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, or Quad, which comprises the US, India, Japan, and Australia. It's difficult for India to engage in close security cooperation with a country that is simultaneously waging an economic war against it. The conflict exposes the inherent contradictions in America's foreign policy, where it seeks India's partnership in security matters while penalizing it on the economic front. This could weaken the Quad's coherence and effectiveness as trust between Washington and New Delhi erodes. Other American allies are watching closely, concerned that they too could be targeted by similar unilateral actions. Furthermore, this dispute strengthens the resolve of non-Western groupings like BRICS+. The fact that Brazil was also hit with similar tariffs reinforces a narrative among these emerging economies that the current global economic system is weaponized against them. As a result, these nations are likely to accelerate their efforts to trade in local currencies, develop alternative payment systems, and create their own financial institutions to reduce their dependence on the US dollar and American-led platforms. The 2025 trade war may well be remembered as the moment the post-Cold War unipolar world order finally gave way to a more fragmented and contested multipolar reality. Away from the high-stakes diplomacy and macroeconomic strategies, the trade war is, at its core, a story of human struggle. Consider Lakshmi, a 35-year-old woman who works as a garment checker in a factory in Tirupur. For the past 10 years, her steady income has supported her two children's education and her family's healthcare. Now, her factory has lost its biggest American client. Her supervisor has told the workers that shifts will be cut by half, and if new orders don't come in within a month, there will be layoffs. Lakshmi lies awake at night, consumed by anxiety. The trade war, for her, is not a headline. It is the terrifying prospect of not being able to afford her son's school fees. In Surat, a young diamond polisher named Sanjay has just been told not to come to work from next week. He is a master artisan, able to cut facets onto a tiny stone with incredible precision. His skill was in high demand, allowing him to dream of buying a small flat for his family. Now, his workshop is silent. The owner, deeply apologetic, explained that with no orders from the US, he simply cannot afford to pay wages. Sanjay now contemplates taking up a manual labor job for a fraction of his previous pay. The trade war has devalued his unique, hard-earned skill, reducing him to an uncertain and precarious existence. Think of a shrimp farmer, Anjaya, on the coast of Andhra Pradesh. He invested his life savings and took out a significant loan to convert his paddy field into a shrimp pond, lured by the promise of high returns from exports to the US. For 2 years, he was successful. Now, his buyer has cancelled the contract, citing the 50% tariff. Anjaya has a pond full of market-ready shrimp that local markets cannot absorb at a price that would even cover his costs. The bank is calling about his loan repayments. The trade war has turned his dream into a nightmare, trapping him in a cycle of debt from which he sees no escape. These are not isolated anecdotes. They are representative of millions of lives being upended. For every container of goods that is not shipped, there is a chain of people. The factory worker, the artisan, the farmer, the truck driver, the packer, the port laborer, whose livelihoods are jeopardized. The trade war's true impact is measured in these personal stories of lost hope, shattered dreams, and daily struggle. It serves as a stark reminder that decisions made in faraway capital cities have profound and often devastating consequences for the most vulnerable people on the ground, whose voices are rarely heard in the calculus of global power politics. As India grapples with the fallout from this unprecedented trade war, the path forward requires a combination of immediate damage control and long-term strategic vision. The focus must be on resilience. For small businesses and exporters on the brink, survival is the first priority. The government's emergency credit and GST refund schemes are vital first aid. However, policy must go further. A dedicated trade war distress fund could offer grants or soft loans to help the most vulnerable MSMEs retool, modernize, and diversify. Export promotion councils must be empowered to act as rapid response teams, aggressively seeking new buyers in markets across Southeast Asia, Africa, Latin America, and Europe. Secondly, this crisis must be a wake-up call to accelerate diversification. Over-reliance on a single market is a strategic vulnerability. India needs a market access mission on a war footing, tasked with negotiating free trade agreements with new partners and blocs. This means cutting through red tape and showing the political will to conclude agreements that can open up new, stable export destinations. For businesses, this means investing in market research and product adaptation to meet the standards and tastes of consumers in Japan, the European Union, or the UAE. It is a difficult pivot, but a necessary one for long-term health. The principle of Atmanirbhar Bharat should be interpreted not as isolationism, but as building deep domestic strength. This means strengthening the entire manufacturing ecosystem. Improving logistics, ensuring low-cost power, and simplifying labor laws are more critical than ever. The government can also use this opportunity to boost domestic demand for the products that were previously exported. A Buy Indian campaign, backed by quality assurances, could help local producers of textiles, handicrafts, and other goods find a new customer base at home, cushioning the blow from lost international orders and fostering a sense of national economic solidarity. Finally, there is a message of hope. The Indian economy is resilient, and its entrepreneurs are resourceful. The pain of this trade war is real and acute, but it does not have to be a death sentence. By combining government support with entrepreneurial agility, India can navigate this storm. Legal challenges at the WTO, proactive diplomacy to repair ties, and a relentless focus on finding new opportunities can chart a course to recovery. This crisis, as formidable as it seems today, can become the catalyst that forges a stronger, more diversified, and truly self-reliant Indian economy, capable of withstanding the tempests of a volatile world. The storm may rage, but the ship can, and must, be steered to safer shores.